G'day and thanks for joining us for another Australia Talks. I'm DK and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Ardeet. Today is Saturday, the 25th of July, 2026, and our topics this week are AI-powered traffic lights, a tale of priority and fairness, perhaps. And the government wants to tap the $4 trillion Aussies have in super to address some of Australia's challenges. Of course, we've also got our 2-6 Town Talk, and then we'll jump into This Week in Australian History, and we'll finish off, as always, with a 4X bottle top trivia. But before we get into all of that, let's catch up with the last week. Ardeet, hello. How are you going?
Hello, DK. Yeah, we're off on a different day. Mates of the podcast might notice. So yeah, there's a couple of things that had to be attended to in personal side. So thank you for your patience on waiting a day for our dulcet tones. DK's dulcet tones, my semi nasally ones. I had my colonoscopy, which I flagged last week, and that all went pretty straightforward. A couple of things that got to get checked up. You know, they always take a few samples where they see things and just wait for biopsies to come back, but nothing that particularly freaked out the gastroenterologist, so that was good. Tried to do my normal thing of seeing how long I could stay awake after the anaesthetic and the anaesthetist. Because I thought, this time I'll really. And the anaesthetist said, "Okay, you can go and have a sleep now." I thought, it's gone in, and I could just start to feel it. And I thought, good, and then I'm awake. So, yeah, as per usual.
You can't defeat it. You just doesn't matter how hard you try.
No, you can't. And I also meant to say on a totally different topic, those green bell nail clippers from Japan that you mentioned. Yes. I did grab a pair of those. Given how you were talking them up, love them. So, best nail clippers I've ever used. Just well leveraged, nice and sharp and neat, well designed, good to look at, and even having that little in the pair that you recommended, having that little magnet so you can put it on, just clip it onto something. So very good call, DK. Was really happy with that. So yeah. That was, have a look at last week's episode if you want a link to the company website. We don't have any affiliation things, so you can go in there and work out yourself where you want to get them from. But yeah, they were exceeded expectations. So yeah, appreciate the heads up on that.
Not a problem at all. It is funny how it's nice to. It feels like a very adult thing to be appreciative of something so simple, But it's something you use. And for something so cheap as well.
Yeah, exactly. And just before we find out what you're up to, I was looking at the calendar and forgot to mention that 20th of June this year marked 3 years of us doing the podcast in the current format. So if mates of the podcast have ever wondered why we're currently noted down at season 6, because seasons 1 and 2 were essentially an experimental format, and then season 3 was a very short one when we're sort of getting some final things twisted out, and thought, that's a good way to delineate them. So if you thought, season 6, what happened? So that's what happened. So to me, I consider the 20th of June our official Australia Talks podcast anniversary. So yeah, I don't know why I missed that and didn't have that written down, but yeah, 3 years. So there we go.
Happy birthday, Australia Talks.
Yes.
For last month.
Belated
birthday.
Yeah, exactly. So what have you been up to?
It was my daughter's birthday earlier this week. So it's been, and actually a friend of mine's birthday earlier this week. So it has been a bit of a crazy week with birthdays and busy, and it's been cold again. The temperature was sort of starting to warm up, and then all of a sudden it's dropped down cold. And I think it's because we've had a southerly breeze. You damn Southerners are sending your wind up this way.
Could well be too. My parents up in Sydney had a bellyache as well about the cold.
Yeah, it's been, I don't know what's changed, but hopefully, it'll start warming up. I'm not too optimistic. We are still in the middle, it's towards the end of July, so we still got a little ways to go before we get the proper warmth. But my parents also just got back from a European holiday, and so they have been absolutely cooking over there. Which tells you something when Queenslanders go to Europe and they're hot. So I'm a little bit nervous about what this summer might hold for us if the Northern Hemisphere had such a bad. I know that the weather doesn't cross the equator too often and all of that kind of stuff, but it certainly seems that the trend is that these sort of weather events become a bit more extreme. So we'll see what happens. But what I'm trying to say is, don't get too comfortable. I will continue to whinge about the weather on a pretty regular basis.
Well, with my parents, you had some fellow whingers, and that's I gotta say, if your folks have got back from Europe and they found it hot, obviously I'm aware they're having heat wave conditions over there, but sometimes there's probably a little bit of an arrogant thing. You see the temperatures and you sort of think, yeah, it's not really a heat wave. But, okay, well, that puts a different colour on it.
Yeah, I think when they were in Rome and they said that they had it was 38 degrees or something like that. So it's certainly hotter than you would expect for that part of the world, basically. And that's concerning. I think it also compounding is a lot of European places don't have air conditioning because, generally speaking, it's not needed. And as a result, it's just not something they think about. They have heating, but they don't have cooling because they don't need cooling. So, this is a problem when there's a heat wave. There's sort of no escape from it, unfortunately. So,
yeah.
But look, if you're one of our European listeners and you are dealing with a heat wave, that sucks. I'll send you some of the cold that I'm dealing with at the minute. But hey, I expect you to do the same thing when I'm whinging about how hot it is down here. So,
the big long weather tube.
That's right. It goes both ways. Come on. Got some very big fans on either end. All right, let's get stuck into it.
I thought you were going to take advantage of that and say, speaking of going both ways.
That would have been better. Speaking of going both ways, a new trial of AI-powered traffic lights will be a test for who gets priority on public roads. It's not started yet, but later this year, a Queensland council will trial Australia's first traffic light system powered by artificial intelligence. The new traffic technology will be trialled in the city of Moreton Bay, just north of Brisbane, at an intersection of two suburban roads in Petrie, just, as I said, north of Brisbane. Basically, just to paint a picture of what this intersection looks like, it is, they call it suburban roads, but basically it is a road that goes to a university and a car park. So it's not a particularly busy intersection outside of a handful of time during the day. So it is quite a controlled environment, even though it is a public road. And so I think this is a good place to test it. If this is an abysmal failure, it's not going to destroy traffic flow in and out of a major city or a major area or something like that. Obviously, you want to try these things on a small scale. But if this is successful, they can then trial it into a larger, more important sort of intersection and things like that. So at first, this may sound like basically a small transport story, but it really raises some hard hard questions about fairness, safety, and who gets priority on public roads. And if this trial does work, we can see similar systems being used across Australia. At every intersection, cars, buses, cyclists, and pedestrians compete for time. A conventional traffic light is just like a kitchen timer, but with a few extra steps. Road sensors may change some of the timings and the traffic lights, but basically the traffic lights still follow a set of rules. This shouldn't be a surprise for anyone that's driven in Australia for any amount of time, because this can become particularly frustrating when you're sitting at a red light while an empty road has green, and you're just sitting waiting, and sometimes people don't wait, and that can obviously lead to accidents and serious safety issues. Personally, this kind of grinds my gears a little bit, but I'm not going to go into that because I could whinge about traffic for a very long time. An artificial intelligence or AI traffic light is more like a referee watching the intersection and manually adjusting the timing. It can use sensors and traffic data to see where cars, buses, cyclists, and pedestrians are, and it may also use past traffic patterns and outside data such as weather or major events information. It can then change the signal in real time based on what's happening and what it expects to happen next. And it may give more green lights to busy times on a busy road, or say let a bus move through the intersection, or give school children longer time to cross the road. These systems can bring real benefits. In the United States, for example, Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh is piloting the similar system, and it cut traffic travel time by 25% and stationary waiting time by 40%. And thus, that reduced estimated emissions by more than 20%. So a win-win all around. The hard part is not only using data and AI technology, it is kind of deciding who gets priority and whose time matters the most. So imagine a school intersection at 8:30 in the morning. Cars, of course, are all lined up, and there's a bus full of children waiting. Some students also need to cross the road, and a cyclist is waiting. The AI may help reduce waiting time, but it basically needs to choose who gets priority. Should the cars move faster? Do we need to give the children more time to cross the road? Should we let one bus full go before perhaps a bunch of cars? Or maybe that cyclist is very important and they should go first. Unlikely. But I mean, these questions, as much as they sound like they're traffic questions, they're not just traffic questions. They are an urban design questions as well. And they show what kind of city that we kind of want to build. Traffic lights do more than just manage the traffic. They could also shape our behavior by rewarding some ways of moving and making other types of movement through a space uneconomical. If cars always get priority, people will drive cars, basically, right? And we've seen that in our modern history. Over the last 100 years, as cars have been invented, people went from walking or riding or a man on a horse to driving, which, depending if you like cars, is a bad thing or a good thing. Of course, if you prioritize buses and cyclists and pedestrians, then of course people will probably choose to use public transport, cycle or walk more often because having a car becomes a burden. And in this sense, an AI traffic light is not only a technical tool to help move traffic more efficiently, but it can kind of become a part of an urban planning scheme and shape how the citizens of a city move through it. AI traffic lights can also be a very useful new tool, but cities do need to, think about that they should not just begin with the technology and treat it as this will solve our traffic problems. A lot of cities around the country and around the world, for that matter, have massive congestion problems. So I think what we need to start with is deciding what our public goals are, and then allow public consultation on these goals and desires. What do we want our cities to look like? And is this part of the solution to that problem? Or is this going to reshape basically, is this going to make an existing problem worse? Of course, near a school, safety needs to be more important than speed. We already know that. On a busy bus route, public transport might need priority to move more people through the area quickly. In a shopping area, perhaps pedestrians are the priority there. And again, we already see some of these ideas in existing infrastructure around our cities. Councils have a responsibility to explain and coordinate those choices with the public. People should know what data is being collected and how the system is tested and who is responsible if something goes wrong. You can't just point it at the computer and say the computer did it. If the computer cannot be responsible for a death, who is? The best AI traffic light is not the one that moves cars faster and more efficiently through a system. It is also one that acts as a fair referee, has good data to work with and clear rules, and a human ready to step in and fall back on as well. So there's a lot going on here. And part of this just does remind me, I think there's a Utopia sketch about adding an extra lane to a highway and how it reduces traffic time by 2 minutes across the city. And then in the first year, and then every year after that, it actually increases transport time because now it rewards people driving, and with more driving means more traffic, which means the extra lane on the highway is a very short-term game and doesn't actually solve anything long-term. So Ardeet, this kind of it reminds me of that and makes me think of that going, is this actually going to be a good thing, or is this kind of just going to kick the can down the road in terms of traffic problems? But look, there's a lot to unpack here. Are you ready for AI to submit to our AI overlords and let them control the traffic lights? Or do you think this is kind of like a limited solution to a much more complicated problem?
Oh, I think this is firmly a way of the future. I think it's good that they're starting their testing small. Oh, big fan of that. I like trying out ideas where you actually get decent feedback, decent experience and decent data without necessarily going all in. So I think I think this strikes me as a good start. To think that the current control systems aren't going to advance because we've already seen the benefits of advancement in how traffic lights have improved over the decades anyway. To think it's not going to advance is to ignore the march of technology in something like traffic management and urban environment management, and then to think that that's not going to advance and use tools that are currently available, which are AI tools, I think is ignoring what's coming down the pipeline. So to get a little bit ahead of it, or actually I wouldn't even say getting ahead of it, to get on board with where things are going, I like that they're trying it. It's going to be good. I had sort of a certain level of optimism about this, but then once you started talking about the fairness, safety, and priority, I thought they're a very two-edged sword, and it depends who's wielding it. They're ideas that I happen to like, but in the hands of bureaucrats and committees, they can become something abhorrent. You made the comment about shaping behaviour, and I could feel the hackles go up and sort of thinking, oh, hang on, this may not be as good an idea as what I thought, because it's going to be watching, it's going to be making decisions, and so if you do have people in there. In fact, when you were hearing that, I thought, God, I hadn't had this down in my notes, but I noted that down. I see possibly the biggest threat on this, because I think the way that you outlined about how this may develop, how it can become an integral part of urban planning, urban design. When you got to that, I thought, it depends who's imposing their will. And I thought someone imposing their will on it and saying, look, AI, we're going to tell you this is what you have to be doing, regardless of how efficient it might be, rather than the way that I would do it, which is possibly a little bit more of a laissez-faire way of, let's experiment with it and let's see what it works out. Because you're certainly right. Yeah, people competing for time, and that was a good way to describe what happens at an intersection and a set of lights, those different entities for it. But there is an assumption that I think is a trap that they can fall into, that how do we use our existing way of thinking in order to improve efficiencies, rather than saying, let's see what the AI thinks. I mean, it might be something completely out of left field. It might be that the quickest way to get things through is to have a minute's worth for the pedestrians, and 30 seconds for the cars, and the cars and the bikes go at the same time, or that there's a bikes only one. I feel like there's probably this desire to try and use existing models and fit them into this AI infrastructure, rather than say, let's let it have its head and do what it's good at, and that is finding solutions that humans haven't yet thought of. So I suppose I will wait and see. I mean, those results that you talked about from Pittsburgh over in the US, with the 25% reduction in traffic and 40% traffic time and 40% wait time, they're very positive. And it doesn't surprise me that if you have a more advanced metering system for that time, that you should get benefits. Your point about whether or not it's going to, the flow-on effects it's going to have, and is it going to be like that that scene from the TV series Utopia, just a short-lived benefit? I don't necessarily think that's the way it's going to go. I think, if anything, we're going to see an increase of this, and once we start getting into a few more electric vehicles and public transport with smarts on them, I would expect that we're going to get some gains from this. Again, so that qualifier depends who's doing what and how much they're trying to impose their will. But if you can get this system actually talking to each other, because when you zoom out and look at a road transport system and see the cars moving around, it's almost like a thing of ants, or a body with a whole lot of cells, rather than just a discrete unit. If you can get them working effectively, and it may be in a bizarrely organic manner that when you zoom out you think, wow, that looks chaotic, but it actually works. I have a high level of hope that this is actually going to be one of the tools that's going to get us more efficient use of the resources that we've got, rather than keeping on throwing more and more lanes at it. So, I'm initially positive, but I'm cautious on what the bureaucrats may do. What about you? What are your feelings on it? And do you think it's going to be something that will pay dividends, or you got some skepticism?
I guess a bit of both. Like, I am skeptical about this. I think initially there's going to be quite a gain, because there is a lot of quote unquote dumb traffic lights around here, just around the country, I should say, that are in off-peak times, can become quite burdensome. The idea of traffic lights is that you can control the flow of traffic for safety reasons, but also to try and attempt to reduce traffic and keep the flow sort of moving. And so there's sort of like a number of reasons a traffic light may exist in each individual intersection. It may be because of space. It may be because there's too much traffic for a roundabout, and we need something safely. Signs just aren't good enough, stop signs. So we need to actually control the flow of traffic. It may be that you're in a CBD type situation, and the traffic flow there is quite deliberate. Some of those traffic lights aren't dumb traffic lights. They do have some basic rules and sensors and things like that. So we already kind of do this, but this is taking that to that next level. And I do think, especially initially, we will see quite a gain in efficiency, but I think that will drop off really quickly. I think it's like you can now, with all of these smart traffic lights, we can now move people through the city at 15% faster overall, but that's it. There is nothing more to gain by using this new system within the existing infrastructure plan. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head where it's like, I think perhaps the value of AI in a traffic scenario isn't something like this. It's saying to the AI, come up with a better way to do this and see what it comes up with. It may go, this is the best way to do it, but it may not. It may go, no, you actually should do this, this, and that. Maybe turn these roads into one ways or whatever. I think there's a lot of solutions to this problem. But I also think it is very kind of telling. This story is really more than just traffic and solutions to traffic. It's more about, at the end of the day, traffic is people moving from one place to another, and there's lots of people in a single place, and that's causing. Of course, you get exceptions to that, like there's an accident or there's a major event or something like that. But generally speaking, it's people are moving. Most of the traffic on a daily basis is commuters, right? So it's people moving in and out of an area for work to home or vice versa, or going to pick people up from school, whatever. So I think there are some better solutions to those problems. I do think a lot of those solutions revolve around the use of public transport. I'm not a huge fan of public transport. I live regionally. There isn't a lot of good public transport infrastructure out in regional areas. I like having the independence of my own vehicle and things like that. But at the same time, I do understand that, particularly in a major urban setting, there's a point where it is a bit too selfish to expect that you can, without burden, just have your own way, right? So I do think there's like a balance here, and I think regionally what we'll see is a lot more sort of like AI powered traffic lights and things like that. But I think urbanly, I do think the committees are going to probably push us more towards using public transport, lower the barriers to public transport and make it more efficient, make it better, make it appealing to people. I don't like getting on a train or a bus and it being full of graffiti and the seats are all destroyed and stuff like that. Like, no one wants to be in a situation like that, quite frankly, right? But if you go, and I'm not saying it's not super, super common in Australia, but it's not uncommon either. Whereas there are other parts of the world where you go and the public transport's amazing and you can clearly see it has been prioritized, and as a result, people choose it. It is the default option because it is better than trying to be independent in that way. And if there is enough of it, you don't really lose your independence necessarily. You may have to walk a little bit further, but I could use it with a walk every day anyway. So good examples of that is like Melbourne's tram network is quite good if you are within like the CBD area. Sydney's train system within the city is quite good. It's quite easy to get around using the trains. I think it could be better, but that's sort of outside the scope of what we're talking about. But as examples, right? Brisbane's public transport is pretty meh. mostly because there is no rail link between different sides of the city because of the river and so on and so forth. But they're solving that problem now. So I don't know. I don't think this is a silver bullet. I think it's a new tool that's going to increase efficiency, but it's going to only have a certain amount of efficiency gain, and then you basically, if you make them every single set of traffic lights AI, you might go, we've made traffic 25% better in the city. Everyone goes, cool, pat on the back, but that's it. There's not going to be any growing efficiency realistically beyond that initial benefit. So I think it's worth doing. I think it's worth trying. But I'm pretty skeptical that this is going to be like, oh, wow, we've solved traffic forever or anything like that. So
25% is nothing to be sneezed at, though.
Most certainly isn't. What I do want to know more about, and I have linked that study in the show notes as well, and I sort of briefly started going through it, but I think with limited trials like this, it's hard to say if that 25% is going to actually translate across the board, because of course, remember, with traffic lights, you're always stopping one group and it's that prioritizing, right? So they're more efficiently prioritizing. But does that mean that if you're traveling against the flow of traffic, you're now being delayed 25%? So like something's got to give somewhere.
Oh,
and I
see what you're saying. I hadn't interpreted that way. Okay.
If you got a green light somewhere, you got a red light somewhere else, right? And if you're the red light guy, it's pretty annoying. So like I think, and that comes kind of back to the fact that this isn't a silver bullet. It's just a transformation of an existing technology. I'm more excited about what you sort of brought up is maybe there's new ways to do this that we just haven't thought of yet. Maybe the AI can help us in that space as well. So I think it's exciting that we can use this new technology in these ways to solve older problems, but it may not necessarily. We may see traffic completely transformed in, say, 10 years compared to what it is now. But this is certainly a step in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's move on. It's now time for our Two Ticks Town Talk.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've traveled out.
All right, we're having a bit of an amble around this town of, or this week's Two Ticks Town Talk, which is Eildon in Victoria. Just a nice part of the country. I was up there last year. Doing a bit of a fly fishing weekend, learning it with a mate, and I had it in the back of my head, and I thought, and I've been been up there but before, so I thought I'll let people know about it. So it's a small town in the Victorian High Country, located on the shores of Lake Eildon, about 140k northeast of Melbourne. So there's a Scottish settler, Archibald Tom, who had a property called Eildon Station in 1846, which he'd named after the Eildon Hills in Scotland, his wife's birthplace. So that's actually a good one.
Are there lots of eels? I was wondering.
Yeah.
Obviously.
EI. Oh, that was such a danky joke.
Yeah, it was. I'm almost embarrassed.
Well, it never stops either of us, though, does it? And we wouldn't have it any other way. There was a small settlement known as Darlingford, developed in the late 60s following gold discoveries in the area. Though they didn't get much gold out of that. And there's also timber industry started in the district. But Eildon largely emerged in the 1950s to house workers during the construction of the enlarged Eildon Dam, or the dam as it was going to be enlarged at that time. So they were brought into town by the State Rivers and Water Supply Commission to work on building the reservoir. And so we got that shanty town of Eildon beginning to develop. It had 300 permanent houses, and these were pre-cut and fabricated in England and then brought over here and assembled in 14 different plans in an attempt to just sort of make them a bit more interesting and eliminate uniformity, which was a little bit of a surprise to hear to me, because back then you sort of have this sort of feeling that, they just have this let the workers bloody have their same cottages row after row. So to sort of have 14 different plans, I thought that was quite a bit of variety.
Well, they may have looked fairly similar, though, because it might have just been different plans for different sizes of families and things like that. Like what's more appropriate, perhaps.
Yeah, look, I didn't even look at the plans until you said that. I thought, I just expect them to look a bit more different. Yeah, look, it could be right, but
it certainly feels like a lot of options, though. 14 designs is a fair amount. So
yeah, it's a different mindset to what I imagine, which I might be imagining incorrectly. And also they put in roads, water supply, drainage, and electricity at that time. And people who weren't living in the prefabs lived in tents. And the earlier mentioned original Darlington township was flooded once the rising waters of the reservoir occurred, once it was enabled. So today it's a popular holiday and water sports destination. So you've got pubs, supermarkets, cafes, etc. It's also got deep Aboriginal history as part of the Dungwarong people, or Dungwarong County, and they're a mob of the Kulin nations, and they've got traditional connections to the Goulburn River and its tributaries, which is the main river that flows there through the lands now occupied by Lake Eildon, the surrounding high country. So they've been there for tens of thousands of years prior to European settlement. Its status is one of Victoria's premier inland recreation spots. I've got links in the show notes, and you can see why. You can get a good sort of overview of Lake Eildon itself, because the lake itself has got a surface area of just under 14,000 hectares when it's full, and a shoreline. Have a guess how long its shoreline is.
Oh, I have no idea, because I've never been there. I don't even know, but I'm imagining it must be really long, the fact that you're saying this. So when I think of a big lake, I'm thinking of like a big sort of like maybe like an oval or rectangular body of water. But the fact that you've said that makes me think it's in a river valley, so maybe it's really long.
Yeah, it's a whole. It's got a shoreline of 515 kilometres.
Whoa!
Exactly. There's lots of little wiggly ins and outs. It's one of those things. Exactly right. When you sort of think of a lake, you think, Lake Eildon. Here they do the water sports on there, and you sort of have those shapes that you're. But no, this is very irregular. So. Yeah, have when you get to it afterwards, have a look at the on the map. It's an unusually shaped thing, and once you account for all that, that's a lot of shoreline. Got a maximum depth of 79 metres, and it's the only inland waterway in Victoria where houseboats are permitted. So they've got about 700 vessels on Lake. Yeah. We went on a houseboat there many years ago, and it was pretty groovy. Just a house on a boat, hence the name. Just puttering along, you go in and out, and sort of, this is where we're going to go and pull up for the night, and everything's sort of all there and self-contained. It was actually, it's on the list to do again. I'd love to head off and do that again. It was just such a nice, and because it's a lake, you don't sort of have a whole lot of waves and things.
It's very sheltered.
Yeah, exactly.
And corrosion wouldn't be a huge issue either, because I imagine it's fresh water too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. The lake also features in popular culture, with the nearby town of Bonnydoon, which was used for the holiday scenes in the film The Castle. Which, if you know the film, House of Serenity, you'll know the place. If you don't, check out the film. It's a bit of an Australian classic.
I love it. And Bonnie Doon's at the other end of the lake from Eildon, is it?
Yeah, well, I'm trying without swapping screens and having a look at the map. But yeah, it's away from it, but yeah, because I mean, there's plenty of shoreline for which it can be on. The Eildon Weir was later expanded into the Eildon Dam and the associated Eildon pondage. So that the pondage it's a man-made stretch of water between the Goulburn River and Lake Eildon. So it's divided into a couple of sections, and it's a key to fishing spots accessible from land-based areas. So the history and purpose of that dam went back to irrigation needs, as these so often are. So the original dam was Weir was there 1915 and 1929 to provide water, modified in 1930, but that just proved insufficient for the growth. And then in 1951, they undertook this major enlargement, and they completed that in 1956. Creating the current embankment dam, 84 metres high, and that impounds. Yeah, it's impressive. Yeah, probably not the tallest dam in the world, but when you're there, standing there and having a look up at it, it's still impressive. And then when the amount of water you see that's holding back,
yeah, you better not spring a leak, I tell you.
No, exactly. So now its prime purpose is irrigation for the Goulburn Valley, a potable water supply, including some pipelines to Melbourne, and also hydroelectricity generation. So the power station there's got a capacity of around 135 megawatts, so not massive, but it does contribute. As I said, beautiful part of the country. You've got Lake Eildon National Park around it with its hills. I mean, they get described as mountains, but I always feel funny in these Two Ticks Town talks when you're talking about mountains here in Australia, and people over like you saw Japan, New Zealand, or Switzerland, or parts of America, thinking, "Oh, these mountains! It must be so disappointing to come over here sometimes and think, oh, that's a hill."
Yeah.
But they get called mountains. But yeah, you got the green pastures, you got the bushlands and wildlife. Whole lot of walks around the place and camping there as well. The water sports you can do on the lake. There's boating, kayaking, canoeing, swimming, jet skiing in some areas, sailing, water skiing, and paddle boarding. So it's. Yeah, it really gets utilised. One of the big things that the area is known for is the fishing and supporting fisheries. So trout came to Australia in the 19th century, and they successfully hatched brown trout in Tasmania in 1864, and then rainbow trout soon after that. Really popular fishing, and soon those stocking efforts got to Victoria, and they released trout into Eildon shortly after the initial dam construction. And the reason that trout is so successful there is because you've got cool water coming down, but then when you have that very deep dam, it holds the temperature, keeps the temperature down, and it makes a really nice cool habitat, which is part of creating an ideal habitat for the trout there. In fact, they regularly top them up, but they're self-sustaining populations. So it's just worked out as a really nice spot for them. And so this cool water gets released from the dam and essentially makes, down through the pondage and down through the rest of the river, just creates a really good environment for the trouts. And they get a lot of trophy-sized trouts down there. So when we went up there for that weekend, didn't catch anything, but it was fun seeing things. And it was definitely cold. Like even further down from the dam, we were glad we had bloody oath, had the weight of things on. So, yeah, and that fishing to the local economy. The local economy is called the Murrindindi region. Tracks over 50,000 anglers every year.
Wow.
Yeah, so it brings in about $200 million in tourism-related benefits to the area. It's really, and that's why I sort of emphasise that bit there. The fishing it really had just become a place where people travel from overseas to go to. It's got that real idyllic look to it, and it's got good waterways, and very popular. And there's a fair bit of room too to fish. It's not exactly side by side. It's a fair bit of countryside. And look, my opinions on bureaucracies, but the Victorian Fishing Authority, the VFA, who stock this and other waterways in Victoria, have done a really good job here, and they seem to do a solid job overall. Now, I'm not really a fisherman, but I do have my licence, which means I get their newsletter and updates. So their website's good, their licence renewing works smoothly. So I'll get a rare shout out to the bureaucrats there, but they do a good job on that.
Reluctant. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, but look, credit where it's due. They've really, and they've created a very profitable, self-sustaining industry for the area. So yeah, that was a good job on them. So look, they've also with the stocking and sort of evolving the fishing, they've also had a bit of a shift as well. So they've got the trout in there and redfin, but then they started doing another stocking program for mixed native fisheries. So they've introduced Murray cod and golden perch, and the way they've managed them, they're taking off as well. So the trout's the important one, especially in the cooler periods, but it has become a multi-species a multi-species area, and they've got year-round opportunities targeting both introduced and native species. So look, it's a nice part of the world. The fishing, I thought, was a particularly notable thing, and the dam is it's just to me it's an impressive bit of engineering, but what it's created, it's just got such a real, and probably because it's such an irregular shape, it's just got such a nice natural feel to it, and that's why this Two Ticks Town Talk won this week. It's just an amble through a nice part of the world at Eildon, Victoria.
Very good. Another one to add to the list, though I feel like this one's quite, like, because I've looked up where it is. Yep. It is very close to Melbourne, so I'd imagine if you're Victorian based, particularly around the Melbourne Port Phillip area, it's not that far away. Like, what's that? Probably an hour, maybe an hour and a bit out of the city. So
I think it took us a couple of hours to get up there, because you go through, and the drive up is really good. You go through bloody hell, what do they call the, is it Victorian ash? I can't remember the name of the gum tree.
Oh, yes, yep.
Yeah, and it's like big and tall and impressive. So there's a few windy roads to get up there, but it's a beautiful drive as well. So yeah, something you could easily, set aside 2 days on a weekend or through the week if you've got variable schedule, and just be exposed to a really nice part of the world.
Definitely. And something you can enjoy. The Victorian High Country is really beautiful, particularly in the winter when you get a bit of snow and stuff like that. But You can still enjoy these sorts of areas in the summer by going somewhere like this. Probably in the winter, it'd certainly be too cold for me, but in the summer, it would be quite nice, I'd imagine. It'd be really nice in the summer, I'd imagine.
Yeah, exactly. So, as you said, another one for your list, but I'll be back there.
All right, let's move on. The federal government wants to turn the $4.5 trillion in superannuation a national asset, but there are many people, including me, that are a bit concerned. Collectively, Australians sit on a huge, freaking absolutely epic-sized nest egg. It sits at about 4.5 trillion Australian dollars. Our national savings pool is one of the largest in the world. Now, facing big national challenges on housing, productivity and clean energy transition, and so many more things, the federal government has renewed calls to direct superannuation into solving some of these problems. At the annual Superannuation Lending Roundtable last week, Prime Minister Albanese urged the superannuation sector to invest more money in local corporate debt markets. He argued, quote, there is real potential to see these funds as a national asset that can be used more appropriately and get better returns as well, not just for the individuals and for the retirees, but for the nation, end quote. Former Victorian Premier and villain of the show, Dan Andrews, went even further at the same event. I thought he lived in China now. He said that super could be invested in, quote, productivity challenges like housing infrastructure, energy transition, water, or dare I say, pandemic preparedness, end quote. At least he's got a little bit of a sense of humor. Albanese reportedly urged attendees, including the chief executives of several major super funds and banks, to invest more of their members' funds in Australia, in particular businesses lending to fuel growth. There was an immediate pushback in the room, however, with Westpac's chief executive Anthony Miller reportedly telling the Prime Minister, quote, "Don't touch the super complex, don't direct it, and don't tell it where to go," end quote. The superannuation sector and others have long raised concerns that being forced to invest their members' funds in a particular way risks distorting capital markets and therefore the economy as a whole. I feel like we owe some of our international listeners a bit of history and explanation, and maybe some of our Aussie listeners as well that aren't super familiar with superannuation. But superannuation was extended to cover all full-time workers in Australia in 1993, and Australia's superannuation system's primary function is to help people accumulate the savings they need alongside government support. We should put that in small letters, to provide the income they need for a dignified retirement. One of the strengths of the system is that it has been the way that it focuses legal accountability on fund trustees to look for investment opportunities so that they can try to do the best by their members, which is really, really important. Imagine, think of the members as almost like shareholders of a company, and they are legally defined to benefit their members. So if you ever see advertising for superannuation that says something along the lines of we look after our members, or we have to look after our members, just be mindful that that is very much marketing. Their legal responsibility is to look after their members.
Yeah, that's the goodness of their heart.
That's right. This duty is enshrined in the legislation as the best financial interests duty, and this means that trustees legally need to act in the best interest of their members, balancing their potential returns against the risks involved, of course. And focusing on the needs of the trust members is key, not just for the needs of Australian society as a whole. If trustees are asked to weigh in on competing goals. They're members in addition to, let's say, the broader society's well-being. Both objectives are probably going to get diluted there. How do you prioritize between those two things? It can also create incentives for people with particular agendas to get appointed to the boards that manage these funds rather than looking out for the needs of the members as a whole. And this isn't to say that the government shouldn't be able to influence super funds to support projects in the national interest. But there are other ways than mandating their investment decisions. Indeed, some of them are already in place. There was a time when superannuation funds were not taxed on their earnings. Now they are. Tax settings affect which types of investments are attractive for investment by super funds. Governments can also package up certain types of assets and has done this in the past, such as certain toll roads to make them attractive to funds with billions of dollars to invest. Here in southeast Queensland, a lot of the toll roads in and around Brisbane, including the the city bypass, the tunnel that goes under the city, is significantly owned by a number of major super funds, as an example. So next time you grumble about paying tolls, just think that actually might be funding your retirement savings. In 2024, actually, several major super funds partnered with community housing providers to make investments through the Housing Affordability Future Fund, as an example. So government can definitely, shape the direction that they want super to move into, but they need to make it beneficial for the super to invest. Unlike personal investors, many super funds can afford to lock into long-term investments like in infrastructure and similar assets that aren't traded on the stock exchange, or maybe aren't necessarily big enough or wouldn't make sense to be part of an exchange-traded fund. And of course, the members benefit so long as the government ensures that the terms and prices of those arrangements do actually make economic sense. There are also ways that the government can and does act indirectly as well. A big one is the annual performance test, which is imposed by the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, or APRA, on super funds. And this indirectly discourages certain types of strategies, particularly where there is no listed market. The introduction of climate reporting is another one. And we should not underestimate the importance of disclosure obligations and other things like that. So you can indirectly, again, shape the path that super investments are directed. By requiring funds trustees to disclose information about any climate-related risks and opportunities, the government has reinforced the implicit requirement that consideration of these risks is also important. It's a fine balancing act, though, that the government needs to navigate. You need to create opportunities for the funds to find value for their members without mandating a requirement for the funds to invest in specific fields or objectives. There can also be an outcome where we basically get to eat our cake and have it too. But in situations like this, the details very much matter. And if we get it wrong, we come in with a sledgehammer and say, nope, you all need to do this. It could be absolutely disastrous. And we could see that beautiful 4.5 trillion and growing go down the gurgler and be certainly worse off for it. So, Ardeet, how do you feel about this idea? Do you feel that maybe the government should be a bit, sort of guide the hand, or maybe let's just leave it to the markets?
Oh, the concept gives me the heebie-jeebies. I don't think it's going to matter whether it's Labor or the LNP, the Libs in charge. I think all these bureaucrats can barely hide their salivating when they look at our savings. As a great Deborah Harry once said, one way or another, they're going to get you. And I just have no confidence that they're going to respect what is our money. I mean, they keep hinting. It's such a it's a difficult target, though. I can't remember the one that the bloke that you quoted who was from one of the funds or the banks on this, who gave a very strong no and pushback to it. So there's a lot of resistance within the industry to the government getting their sticky little fingers in it. And I think there's a lot of...
That was Westpac's CEO, Anthony Miller, was like,
there you go. Yeah.
Don't touch it, don't direct it, and don't tell it where to go. Keep your hands off.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people feel that way within the industry, and a lot of people feel that way within the general public, of those of us who've got super, which is, pretty much, well, I suppose technically it has to be every working Australian. So, yeah, it's one of those things that, it's funny, despite how many times people will go along with the government, accept this or that, there's an ownership of super that a lot of people say, oh, hang on, no, that's going too far, because there's a real direct connection to what they've got there. So I really don't like this being floated as an idea. And I don't for a moment, but look, there's a few people saying, defending Albo's comments, saying that they were vague suggestions for domestic investment, which super already does, and that it wasn't for nationalisation or seizure, and that they're criticising the media headlines. But no. I've been alive long enough to know that they keep flying these things up, and they see how it goes over. It's just this constant testing round the edges, like a pig nudging the electric wire in the paddock in which it's contained, finding a weakness so it can go out and wreak havoc on the populace. So that's how I tend to view them here. And it's funny too. It's got that sort of callback to what we were doing in our first topic about the concerns I had with the AI traffic lights, in that it comes down again to an imposing of will. If there's incentivising rather than directing, I have less of a problem with that. If it's, because for me, the purpose of super is to make money for the people whose super it is. It's not to make social policy. So if the government says, well, here's something that we're offering for you to, take up. It might be something like that. I don't know what deals were offered for that cross tunnel that you're talking about, but if there's a number of superannuation funds in that, typically that indicates that there's been favourable terms, some sort of surety to the finances that are offered. And I think things like that, good, go for it. No issues whatsoever with that, and that's part of the job. But you touched on something with the climate reporting, and that's an example of, well, they use the term distorting capital market, or the people from that making those comments in there said that things like that can distort the capital markets. I would use the word corrupt the capital markets, and you've got something like that climate thing. And whilst I do have, I do want the climate to be treated well. No surprise to mates of the podcast who listen for a while to know that I'm not all on board the climate change train. But for those who have got it as an almost ideological drive, they can get in that position where you can backdoor putting these social policies in. And this is climate reporting. You can look at it one way and you can say, okay, I can understand why we have to do that. We don't want our superannuation things out there just saying, oh, great, we can throw up a dirty coal generating plant right in the middle and not have any concerns about that and just make money from it. I do understand that there is a balance there, but you can use that to nudge and twist and corrupt and coerce money into a direction that you are ideologically captured by. That's not just climate, it can be it can be anything. It could be I would have the same issue if they came out and said, look, with critical minerals, something that is particularly important to the economy, and there's a lot of good arguments for incentivising. But if they came out and said, well, now you have to have a certain exposure to critical minerals, and we're expecting you to report on that, and you have to have these requirements to report, I'd have the same issue with that. So it's actually the process that I have the issue with there, and trying to push and manipulate according to ideologies rather than profit, which at the end of the day is the safe, reliable profit, which is what they're in the business of for the people who've actually given them their money. So that's how I tend to feel about it. As I said, the concept just gives me the heebie-jeebies. There could be some ways that they could do it well to incentivise, but no, big no from me on this. How about you? How's the actual concept go over with you? How do you sort of view it as being run in super now, and what do you see as potential positives and negatives?
I don't think this is a good idea for a number of reasons. I think it's almost like intellectually lazy to point at the 4.5 trillion that's sitting there, which I should point out as well, is it's not just a pile of cash sitting there. It's obviously invested in other things, and those members, that's not the government's money, and those people may not want to invest it in things that the government wants them to invest it in. I shouldn't have any obligation to buy Australian stocks if I don't want to. At the end of the day, it's my money, it's your money, it's every working Australian's superannuation, and they should have the right to direct where that money is invested in. I'm not against the government saying, hey, we've got we've got an infrastructure plan, or we need money for housing, we need direct investment from industry, where superannuation may decide to step in and be part of the funding solution for that investment. I have no problems with that at all. And I think that is the way that this needs to be addressed. A bit like what you said. I don't trust the LNP. I don't trust Labor. I most certainly don't trust some of the smaller parties like the Greens or, God forbid, Pauline Hanson or somewhere like that to actually have their hand on this button to direct this responsibly. Because remember, superannuation is an investment strategy that for young Australians today is an investment portfolio that is going to be invested for, let's say, 30 or 40 years before they're going to have access to it. That is the idea. If we've got an election cycle every 3 years, or let's say in the future it might be 4 years or even 5 years, regardless, those election cycles and those investment strategies are generally not that long term. Sometimes they are, but not always. And how many times have we seen cost overruns in major infrastructure projects? Like, it's becoming a sick joke that we just can't build anything anymore because it's just, for one reason or another, everything just becomes too hard, too difficult, too expensive, blah, 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 blah. Is that really where you want your superannuation invested into? No, that's not mine, thanks. Yeah. And so I think there is an idea here, and without actually talking to him, I do think this is probably a situation where Albanese may have kind of had an idea and just throwing it out to the audience to see kind of, hey, maybe we should do this. And everyone's gone, what the hell? No. And it's like, okay. Maybe I thought I had an idea, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something more that they're working on. And that concerns me quite a lot. I think superannuation really does need to be more indirectly sort of shaped, I think you have to be very, very careful about direct intervention, particularly in terms of investments, because you don't. The purpose of it is essentially to replace the pension scheme. And I think that's a great idea. And like, we are the envy of a lot of the world with this program. And a lot of other countries have literally copied the legislation and the framework for superannuation. So we're kind of a world leader in this space. Let's not cock that up because we've got other problems going along the way. Let's not, chop off our nose to spite our face, basically.
Yep.
We can have both, but we need to be clever about how we do it. And I think what kind of concerns me is that this government, I hope, won't do this. But maybe if we had a more radical government, they may go, oh, no, I don't care. Like, we're doing this because we need some cash, because it's just low-hanging fruit in their mind. And that's what concerns me about these sorts of comments. It's kind of like, no. We need to make people aware that this is not a particularly good idea, and there are reasons for that.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, imagine if someone says to you, I've got 2 pizzas and you can have this one and it's $5 and it's 20 inches and it's delicious and you'll love it and you'll want to come back and have it all the time. Or I have this small 6-inch pizza and it's $60, but I'm telling you, you have to buy that one. It's like, well, no, I don't want that one. I want that one. No, you don't have a choice. Well, why did you show me that one? Because you just need to know, it's like, don't tease me. Don't make it worse. Like, just let the market decide where it wants to go, and let the members have a choice, Yep. Because members do have a choice. So when you invest in your super, you can go fully self-managed, literally pick what you want and everything like that, or you can just part of a major fund, which is most Aussies are part of a major fund, often directed by their employer, and then they kind of go from there. But not always. And within those funds, of course, you can pick your own sort of portfolio depending on what your risk tolerance is and how young you are and so on and so forth, and what priorities you have, because there already are super funds that are like specifically for, this is moral investing. We only invest in like green infrastructure and organic agriculture or whatever they are. There's so many businesses that are like, no, everything's certified and and it's good and gives you the warm and fuzzies and all of that kind of stuff. And then there's other super funds that are like, we don't give a crap. We invest in defense contractors and we do this, that, and the other thing. So, but the benefit of all of that is that there's choice. People can choose where their values are and what aligns with them and their investments. Whether or not those investments may be better or worse for them in the long term, but that's their choice. That's the freedom of choice that we have in this country. I don't like the idea that the government's going to step in and go, oh, no, you have to do this now. You have to buy that crappy pizza because we've said so. Because the pizza man needs to get his pizza money. And we've told the pizza man he can have his pizza money. And it's like, let's not do that. So, yeah, I think the super scheme works well, which is why there's $4.5 trillion in it, right? Yeah, if it was an unsuccessful program, we wouldn't be talking about it. Because it's successful, now they're looking at it going, maybe we should tap into that. No, it's successful because you haven't touched it and you've left it alone. So let's not let it become another.
Good way. Yep, exactly right.
We don't need another white elephant project in this country. We've got plenty of them already. So let's just, I don't want super to become bloody Snowy 2.0 or anything like that. Like, let's just come up with some good investment plans, go to the market and say, this is what we got. We need major money for major infrastructure. Let's do it. Make it make sense, and they will come.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Agree completely. And look, I mean, there's part of it. I mean, there's a certain mandatory part to super. It's not necessarily it's been sold and it's all voluntary. There is that mandatory component to it, but that's probably really an example of the government pushing people, but doing it to a certain degree, and you think, okay, I can see that's a way of managing potential future bills for pensions that we're going to have to measure. We're going to have to manage one way or the other in the economy that we've got. I can see the reasoning for making that decision. I can also say too, whilst the minutiae of superannuation I'm glad I'm not an accountant having to work it all out. At its heart, though, there is some simplicity to the concepts. And one of the things, and when you were saying that then about the choice that's offered within your superannuation fund, where you can play with the balances and you can play with what you're exposed to within, it's a limited choice, but you still have some choice. It's also, and this is where something government has done well, they've enabled transferring from one super fund to another without penalties and anything onerous. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, I've done that in the past. It's a reasonably straightforward process. I mean, there's always bloody forms and a whole lot of other stuff. However, you can do it, and it's not as if you met by resistance from your super fund saying, "Oh no, this is a 6-month process. We've got all these things there." It's something that they have to comply with. It's been standardised, so it does make it easier for people to shift. Which means if there is something that's offered, and that might even be a government superannuation, our Albo's big infrastructure fund, that people have the option of going to, that could be presented there as an alternative. But and that still working within the market, because as you said, it's worked because they've left it alone. That was just a key point. You nailed it with that.
Yeah, and I truly believe that as well. Like, we don't want a government-led economy long term. It's not going to benefit Australia in the way that I think I think it's kind of like a short-term thinking. It's a solution for a short-term problem, which will lead to a long-term issue, in my opinion. And so I really think this is the wrong way to go about it. And a bit like, as you just explained, you could have a fund where it's like, or there are already government, like this Commonwealth super and stuff like that. The government themselves have their own super programs. So it's kind of like, if you can, again, it has to make sense for the members because that is their legal mandate. But if you can make it make sense to members for a fund, other funds will jump in as well. And actually, you can make it very, very lucrative. And sometimes some of these major infrastructure plans are actually very lucrative investments over the long term. And so you're not going to get a lot of smaller retail investors and stuff like that because it may be a really long term, this is a 20-year plan or something like that. But that's exactly where some of the super can really kick into gear. So I think there is kind of a nugget of truth in sort of Albanese's and other politicians, he who will not be named, suggestions, but it very much needs to be tempered. It needs to be controlled, and the details, the weeds here really matter. And so, yeah, I don't like the idea, though, that it's like, shut up, don't even talk about it because we don't want to give anyone ideas because this could go really, really, really wrong and totally screw us. And as someone that has a long time before preservation age, I would prefer that we just leave it alone and, not rock the boat too hard or anything like that. So.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, let's move on. It's time now for This Week in Australian History.
Right, this week in Australian history, we're covering the 17th to the 23rd of July. July 17th in 1964, Donald Campbell set a speed record of 403.1 miles per hour for a jet-propelled four-wheeled vehicle on Lake Eyre.
Which is 648.7 kilometers per hour.
Thank you.
I think last year we hadn't got it, so I was like, I need to make sure I got it.
I should have updated that one. So good showcasing us. Go on.
Sorry, but that is an obscenely fast.
Oh, God.
Nearly 650 kilometers an hour on the ground. That's no thanks. I'm sorry. I'm not. No,
not in a car. I mean, if you're in a bullet train or something like that, there's a bit of different, but no, not in a car.
Yeah, no.
Good on you, Don, but keep it to yourself.
Well, unfortunately, he didn't make it one of the runs. So yeah. Sorry.
Which one of those things? What's that?
It's not surprising for these guys. A lot of them, they died doing what they loved. But
exactly. One minute he was speeding along a flat surface on a shaky vehicle at 600 kilometers per hour. The next minute he's dead. Why does this always happen?
Who could have seen it coming?
Yeah, exactly. July 18th in 1914, you might remember this bloke taking off on last week's history segment, and he finally arrived. Maurice Guillot lands in Sydney, completing the first airmail delivery from Melbourne to Sydney. 1983, the first death attributable to AIDS occurred in Australia. 1984, the National Crime Authority is established, and that was targeting, it targets organised crime, but with federal powers. July 19th, 1915, Albert Jacka becomes the first Australian to win the Victoria Cross during the First World War for bravery at Gallipoli. 1916, in the Battle of Fromelles, the first battle of the Western Front involving Australia, the 5th Division suffered 5,533 casualties in one night. It's just, they're insane numbers.
That entire war is just insane numbers. But that,
God.
Horrendous. When you consider there was... the amount of troops that Australia sent wasn't that insane. To have that level of casualties in a single night is disgusting. I mean, we didn't even have that many deaths in 20 years of the war in Afghanistan. So I think if our casualties were that high over that 20-year period, I think people would have been up in arms. So the fact that happened in one night is disgusting.
Yeah. Yep. 1940, the Australian cruiser HMAS Sydney takes part in the sinking of the Italian cruiser Bartolomeo Colleoni, and it boosted Allied efforts in the Mediterranean. 1958, the last tram service runs in Perth in Western Australia. They went to buses after that. 1987, the final episode of the music program Countdown is broadcast on the ABC. It launched a lot of musical careers, but it's interesting to see how long ago that was. I had forgotten it was that long ago. I should have remembered it probably from last year, but 87, bloody hell. July 20th, 1972, police in Canberra disassemble the Aboriginal Tent Embassy and arrest 8 protesters, but then it was re-established in October and still there.
Still there?
Yep. July 21st, 1991, Greek tanker Kirki spills just over 17,000 tonnes of crude oil off the coast of Western Australia. Biggest oil spill in Australian waters, and it was a big clean-up after that. July 20th, 1870, state flag of Australia is adopted. Now, you quizzed me on these state flags a number of months ago, but do you remember what was on the South Australia state flag?
I do. It is a magpie.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
The piping shrike.
That's it. So I was like, come on, what is it? What is it? What is its actual name? I couldn't remember, but yes, it's a magpie basically.
Yeah. And they have that thing there. It's called the white-backed magpie, but when you look at it, apparently it causes a bit of confusion for a lot of people. And when I read this, it's actually got, you're looking at the back of the bird, but the bird's got its head tilted to the side. So a lot of people look at it and think, oh, that's a front-on view, which causes confusion.
It is confusing. And even though I know that, when I look at that flag, I don't think it's the back of the bird. I'm like, no, that's like its belly. I think it's just a weird perspective, I guess.
Yeah. You're right. It's a weird perspective.
Because also, it feels like it should be facing you. Why is it looking? Why is it running away? Like, I don't know.
I think that's probably what we think. You're so used to you think, well, it must be facing us. It's a flag, but no. 1938, the Australian National War Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux in France is open, and that's honouring Australian World War I sacrifices in Europe. Bretonneux. July 20th, still on July 22nd, 1983, aviator and businessman Dick Smith completes the first solo round-the-world helicopter flight, which was an innovation in aviation and a bloody long trip.
It's wild that he did that. Like, I have a soft spot for Dick Smith. He's done a lot of crazy stuff, and this is certainly one of the crazy things he did.
Yeah, agreed. And July 23rd, 1916, Arthur Seaforth Blackburn and John Leake were awarded the Victoria Cross for their separate actions at the Battle of Pozières, and that was during fierce fighting on the Western Front. And finally, on July 23rd, 2023, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Canberra in Sydney, New South Wales, and it was the first time that a US Navy warship had been commissioned in an Australian port, and it was named after the HMAS Canberra and Australia's capital, and that was highlighting the Australia-US defence relationship. And it was also notable because it was the first US Navy ship to be fully crewed by teetotalers. No, that would be crazy. That would be absolutely insane. Of course it wasn't. Of course they cracked a beer on the day.
All right, that noise means it's time for our 4X bottle top trivia. This week we have a theme, and the theme is incredibly, it's actually tea. No, I'm kidding. It's trees, which is fun.
It's fun. I can sort of hear your wheels whirring a little bit, thinking, like, no, he's bullshitting. Couldn't even be a possibility.
Imagine if it was. Now, so question one, the humble she-oak tree, or casuarina, as most commonly called, has been recorded with the deepest roots on Earth. How far down have they found them? Yeah.
Wow, that's a good question. God, in fact, we've got several casuarinas. I get confused between casuarina and LA casuarina, and I always think of that LA casuarina, but I get confused whether they're the same thing or that. But got some of them planted in the driveway. They're only a couple of years old, but got some of the deepest roots. I've never heard of this before. Well, let me try and reason it out, because the roots normally extend out to about the width of the branches. So maybe, let's say, if they go down to I'm going to say, and I reckon I'm going to be completely wrong on this one, 35 metres?
Oh, that's very deep. So a little bit too far.
Good. God, I was thinking, God, can I exaggerate up? How deep?
18, which is still very deep.
That's a long way down.
Yeah. I used to always think when I was a kid that like a tree's roots were kind of as tall as it was, but that's not really true. Well, it literally isn't true for most trees. Their roots, generally most trees are sort of within the first meter of a soil. Some of them do go further than that. They obviously spread out a lot, but they don't really go as deep down as a lot of people think. But obviously, different trees in different environments have different requirements, and as such, can go a lot further. But I do wonder if, because of the nature of roots being underground, it does make them quite difficult to study naturally. So I do wonder if this number will be sort of this record, if you like, will be broken as we continue to learn more about the incredible trees on our planet. All right. Question 2. Gum trees are Australia's most common native plant, but why are they called gum trees?
Ooh, I'm pretty sure I know this, but I'm wondering if you're going to be sideswipe me with another. Because of, I thought it was because of what a lot of the species secrete, which is, I don't think it's necessarily a sap, but it's something that the trees do excrete, which can be sort of considered like a gum. So I don't know if it is sap, but it's an excretion.
Yes, you're 100% right. It is basically the thick, oozy, gummy sap that they secrete almost exclusively when they're damaged, when their trunk surface is damaged. And as a result, as we're great at naming things, as we've established over the years, and they were like, that tree's got gum on it. Wow, that's a gum tree, obviously. So yeah, that's why it's kind of like a broad term as well for you know, like there are a lot of different types of gum trees, and that's because it's does it have sap? Yes. Well, that's a gum tree. Or does it have leaves? Well, then it's a leaf tree. All right, this one is, admittedly, this one is quite difficult, but it is a fun question, so I'll ask it anyway. It turns out that there are a lot of super tall trees, and unfortunately, a lot of them were felled in the late 1800s, and there's not a good consensus over the record holder for the tallest tree. But according to Canadian plant biologist Dr. Alan Cader, the tallest tree ever recorded was likely an Australian mountain ash at Watts River, Victoria, that was reported and felled in 1872 by forester William Ferguson. How tall was it?
Oh, because it's always a bit of a surprising things with trees. You sort of look up and think, wow, look how tall that is. And then someone will say, oh, look at that, that's 25 metres. And you think, oh, I would have thought higher than that. So it's probably not going to be as high as what I reckon, but it's going to be ridiculously high for a tree. So
I should, a little bit of context, they measured this tree once it had been felled from the ground level all the way, because they literally couldn't measure it before. They didn't have a good way to do it. I know you can do it with angles and stuff, and we can do it today with satellites and all those sort of stuff. We have a lot more technology, but in this case, they didn't know it was the record holder until it was on the ground, which is just kind of disgusting, actually. But anyway.
Yeah.
It upsets me a lot.
Yeah, look, especially with that, I've got no issues with forestry, but when you get into old growth and poor management like that, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth like you. But back to your question. So I'm going to say 62 metres.
62?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's taller than the current tallest living tree, which is over 100 metres.
Oh, wow. Okay, over 100.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big tree. Oh, okay. Well, then I'll just take a wild guess and say 112.
Good guess. It was 132.6 metres or 435 and some change feet. The current tallest tree on Earth is located in California's Redwood National Park. It's nicknamed Hyperion, and it is the largest, the tallest tree, tallest living tree in the redwood forest, and it's 116.2 meters tall or 380 feet. Its exact location is kept as a secret to protect it. It used to reside in part of the park that was open to visitors. And people pretty quickly kind of figured out that this was the one, even though it wasn't signposted.
Right.
And they've actually now had to close that part of the park because they were concerned about the number of like foot traffic and things around it is damaging the routes and things like that. So to protect it, its location is kind of secret, but you can find it online if you want to. But now it is actually like sectioned off, but it has been speculated quite widely that it very possibly isn't actually the tallest tree in the park, and then there might be a secret title holder that is being protected that we won't know about until later on. So. There's a lot of super tall trees in that part of the world. And of course, we also see a lot of super tall trees that we've spoken about in the past in Tasmania as well. And a lot of those massive trees are protected and again, are hidden and kind of protected. And you probably are thinking, how do you hide a super tall tree? Wouldn't it just stand out amongst the rest of the forest? And the answer is yes, in theory, but when you've got rolling sort of valleys and things like that, a very tall tree at the base of the valley almost definitely will not be taller than, say, a tree that's on the side of one of the valley walls that is also quite tall. So you can't just look out and go, there it is. You can't just spot it quite as easily as that. And you do obviously need to. In some cases, they literally climb the tree to the top with a rope and then measure because I know it's very simple, and in some cases that is actually the easiest way to measure it from base to tip because you may not be able to have the room, and there are lots of techniques to do it. And they use lasers.
Certainly better than that one of bloody cutting it down and measuring it.
Yeah. No, we have to cut it down and then we measure it. Well, we don't want it to go to waste, so we'll cut it. We'll mill it up now, But we don't want to cut it down to mill it. We want to measure it. But now that it's down, we'll mill it. So
these tallest trees, they just keep getting shorter and shorter. Something must be happening.
Apparently. So a massive shame. William Ferguson, you should be ashamed of what you did to that beautiful mountain ash in Watts River, Victoria. But he certainly wasn't alone in cutting these big trees down. And unfortunately, it seems to be the late 1800s is when a lot of them were cut down, sort of before the turn of the century. And thankfully, very quickly, people realized that this was not something we should continue and we should protect the trees that we have. But of course, it's going to be A lot of these trees are over 100 years old, so it's going to be quite a long time before we do have the protected trees we have now are going to get even close to rivaling some of these super tall trees. But hopefully, fingers crossed, if things go to plan, we should see some of these super tall trees return well and truly after I'm long gone. But for future generations, hopefully we will still have some.
Yeah.
So on that, thank you so much once again for joining us for another Australia Talks. If you have any feedback or suggestions for topics, please get in touch with us on our email at australiatalks@proton.me. We'd also be grateful if you could subscribe and give us an honest review, as this helps us out immensely. But the best thing you can do to help the show is just share it with a friend that you think might like it. Otherwise, join us next week for another episode of Australia Talks. As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget to tell your mama I love her.
Thank you, DK. And if you're in Australia, remember that this coming Monday, they're doing a test of the national alert system. So your phone will go buzzing for 10 seconds at, I think it's 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Double check that online. But just so you don't get surprised on Monday.